She gave everything for her family, only to be abandoned when she needed them most. Now she's rebuilding her life. But what happens when the past comes knocking again? The truth will shock you. It's strange how life can change in the blink of an eye. Just 6 months ago I had a family, a husband, and a sense of stability I never thought I'd lose. Now I'm a single mother, 33 years old, with 2 beautiful but often exhausting twins, Ethan and Emily, who are barely old enough to understand the world around them but already aware that their father is no longer here. James, my husband, was everything to me. We had built a life together. A home full of laughter, shared dreams and quiet moments that I now wish I could hold on to forever. But in the space of one terrible moment, all that was ripped away when a drunk driver slammed into his car, taking him from us. Just like that, I was left with nothing but grief, responsibility, and the daunting task of trying to fill the void left behind for our children. Since then, the silence in our home has been deafening. My mind is always racing, and my heart never quite catches up. The kids, they don't know it yet, but I'm constantly battling my own demons. The weight of their father's absence, the financial strain, the emotional exhaustion. Some days I barely have the energy to get out of bed, let alone raise 2 toddlers on my own. But I do. For them. I have to. I try to keep it together. I have to. But the truth is I feel like I'm barely holding on. To make things even harder, my relationship with my family has always been strained. But now it's more complicated than ever. My parents, Robert and Linda Harris, have always made it clear that I was never quite good enough. The family dynamic was always tilted in favor of my younger sister, Emily. I remember my parents' faces light up when they talked about her. The golden child, so talented, so perfect. I was just the other one. The one who could never quite measure up. Growing up, I learned quickly that my accomplishments went unnoticed, while Emily's were always celebrated. When I graduated college with honors, my parents barely acknowledged it, too busy with their own lives. Meanwhile, Emily was busy appearing in some local commercial that weekend. When I married James, my parents complained about the wedding venue being too far. And when the twins were born, they visited only once, claiming the babies were too fussy to deal with. Stung. But I told myself over and over again that family is family, and love is unconditional. So I swallowed my pride and gave. I gave financially, emotionally, in every way I could. I took care of my parents, supporting them after they retired early 3 years ago, sending them $2,500 each month to help with their mortgage and bills. Even after James died, I didn't stop. I thought I had to be the better person, the one who showed them that family should stick together no matter what. But now, after all that, after all the years of sacrifice, I was in the hospital, facing an emergency surgery for internal bleeding, a consequence of my grief and stress over losing James, and my parents couldn't care less. The situation was urgent, and I needed help. The doctors told me the surgery was critical, that I could be in serious danger if they didn't act quickly. But when I reached out to my parents, asking them to look after my children while I went into surgery, their response crushed me. "Don't you dare ask us to cancel our plans again." My mother's voice rang through the phone, echoing in my hospital room. "We've had these Elton John tickets for months." I just sat there, stunned, clutching the phone as if somehow it could fix everything. My hands were shaking, not from the pain in my abdomen, but from the sharp, cold sting of their indifference. Felt like a slap in the face. There I was, fighting for my life, and my parents couldn't even put down their concert tickets to care for their grandchildren. I wasn't asking for the world. I wasn't asking them to move mountains. All I needed was for them to watch my twins, Ethan and Emily, for a few hours, just until I came out of surgery. But no, they had their plans, and I was nothing more than an inconvenience. "You're becoming a real nuisance, Emma," my father added, his voice stern and tired, like he had said it 1,000 times before. "We're retired now. We've worked hard. We deserve to enjoy our lives without your constant problems." I sat there in disbelief, feeling the weight of his words crushing me. I had been helping them for years, and this was how they repaid me. This was how they viewed me, as a burden, a nuisance. I wanted to scream, to throw the phone across the room, but instead, I just sat there, silent, fighting back tears. My children were still too young to understand what was happening, but they could sense something was wrong. Ethan and Emily were playing quietly in the corner of the room, their innocent little faces oblivious to the storm that was raging inside me. The truth hit me hard. I had given everything to this family. I had sacrificed my time, my energy, and my money. I supported my parents when they retired early because they said they couldn't make ends meet. I even helped them more after James passed, thinking that family was supposed to support each other. But now, here I was in the hospital, possibly dying, and all they cared about was missing their concert. I closed my eyes for a moment, feeling the weight of the past few years crashing down on me. In that moment, I realized something that shook me to my core. I didn't have to keep doing this. I didn't have to keep sacrificing myself for people who would never see me as more than a tool to use. I made a decision. Please call my friend, I told the nurse, my voice trembling. Valerie, one of the hospital staff, had offered to call her friend Chloe Parker, a nanny who specialized in childhood trauma. Chloe was everything I needed: kind, professional, and someone who could care for my children while I focused on getting better. I couldn't rely on my parents anymore. Not when they had so openly chosen their own selfish desires over my family's well-being. I was done. Done being the afterthought. Done being the one who always gave and never received. And most importantly, I was done with thinking I needed their approval. It was time for me to start living for myself and my children, to stop being the person everyone walked over and start being the woman who could finally stand tall. The night I was admitted to the hospital was Christmas Eve, a time when families come together. Yet here I was, alone in a sterile room, facing the possibility of not making it through the night. My body was racked with pain. A sharp, searing sensation in my abdomen that would not relent. The doctors had told me the surgery was urgent, that I had internal bleeding, and if it wasn't addressed soon, I might not survive. But despite the chaos inside me, the physical pain was nothing compared to the agony of being rejected by the people who were supposed to be there for me, my parents. I had reached out, feeling desperate, asking them to watch Ethan and Emily while I underwent surgery. But instead of the concern and love I had expected, I was met with indifference, a callous dismissal that made the pain in my chest feel even sharper. "Don't you dare ask us to cancel our plans again," my mother had said, her voice crackling with irritation through the phone. "We've had these Elton John tickets for months. We're not going to miss the concert for this. You'll be fine." I wanted to scream, to let out the pent-up frustration and heartbreak I'd been swallowing for years. The cruel irony of it all hit me hard. Here I was on the edge of death, needing my parents more than ever, and all they could think about was their concert tickets. I felt like a fool for ever thinking they'd be there for me. They hadn't been there for me before. Why did I ever expect them to be there now? The tears I'd been holding back for so long finally began to fall. I wiped them away quickly, not wanting to be seen as weak, but the damage was done. Their words cut deeper than any physical pain I was feeling. In that moment, I felt more alone than ever before, even though I was surrounded by nurses, doctors, and the quiet hum of hospital machinery. But I couldn't allow myself to drown in that despair. I had 2 young children who needed me. Ethan and Emily had already lost their father, and now if something went wrong during the surgery, they could lose me too. The thought of leaving them without a mother was unbearable, but the thought of leaving them with my parents, who saw them as an inconvenience, was even worse. It was then that I realized something I should have figured out years ago. I had been living my life for other people, constantly trying to earn their approval, especially my parents. I had supported them financially for years, hoping that maybe, just maybe, if I gave enough, if I did enough, they would see me as worthy. But no amount of giving would ever change how they saw me. I wasn't their priority. I was never their priority. I took a deep breath, wiping away the last of my tears, and reached for my phone. As my heart raced, I typed out the first of 2 messages. The first was to my bank, canceling all future transfers to my parents' account. The $2,500 I had been sending them every month. I had been doing it for years out of obligation, out of love, but mostly out of a desperate hope that it would somehow earn me a place in their hearts. Now I knew better. The second message was to my parents, the people who should have been my biggest supporters, the ones who should have had my back no matter what. The ones who couldn't even take an afternoon off to watch their own grandchildren. "I will no longer be providing financial support," I typed, my hands trembling as I sent the message. "My children and I deserve better than being your afterthoughts. Don't contact me again." It was a simple message, but it was one that took all the strength I had left. I had spent so many years doing everything I could to please them, to make them proud, and all I had gotten in return was disappointment. Now I was done. I wasn't going to beg for their love anymore. I wasn't going to put my life on hold just to meet their needs, only to be rejected when I needed them most. I felt a strange sense of relief wash over me as I hit send, but it was quickly followed by a wave of guilt. Had I done the right thing? Was this too harsh? Before I could dwell on those thoughts, a nurse came into the room, her smile warm but tinged with sympathy. She checked my vitals, made sure I was as comfortable as possible, and then said, "Your friend Chloe will be here soon. She's a great nanny and has worked with children who've experienced trauma. You're in good hands." Chloe. For the first time in what felt like forever, a tiny flicker of hope lit up inside me. Chloe wasn't family. She wasn't bound by blood, but she was someone who cared. She would watch over my children, and for the first time in a long while, I didn't have to worry about what would happen to them if I didn't make it through surgery. The nurse's words offered a small comfort, and as I closed my eyes, preparing for what lay ahead, I felt a sense of finality. I had made my decision. I had cut ties with the people who had never truly cared, and I was about to take a step toward a future where I no longer had to live in their shadow. The last thought that crossed my mind before they wheeled me into surgery was that I would do whatever it took to survive. Not just for me but for Ethan and Emily. They deserved better. And no matter what happened next, I was determined to be the mother they needed, not the daughter my parents had always wanted me to be. The surgery was a success. I woke up in a haze, groggy and disoriented but alive. The relief I felt was almost overwhelming. I had made it through, and despite the pain and exhaustion, there was a light at the end of the tunnel. The nurses told me it would take time to fully recover, but I could feel myself slowly coming back to life piece by piece. Chloe was there as promised. She stepped into my hospital room with a smile that felt like a lifeline. She helped take care of the twins, making sure they had everything they needed while I was in the hospital. Ethan and Emily seemed to gravitate toward her, trusting her in a way that I hadn't expected. It was comforting to know they were in good hands. Chloe wasn't just a nanny. She became a friend, someone I could talk to without the usual layers of pretense. She had worked with traumatized children, and she knew how to talk to them, how to calm their fears and anxieties, all while managing to be warm and approachable. She understood what I was going through, even when I couldn't find the words to explain it. She was there every day, helping with the kids, making sure they were fed, and even doing little things like reading stories to them before bed. It was an unusual sense of peace that I hadn't had in months. For the first time I could breathe. But then one morning, I woke up to an unsettling message on my phone. It was from one of the other mothers in the support group. Her words were blunt. "Chloe's gone. No one's heard from her. She left last night." I read the message over and over, trying to make sense of it. Chloe had been so reliable, so dependable. She hadn't mentioned anything about leaving. She hadn't even said goodbye. It didn't make sense. I immediately tried calling her, but the phone rang endlessly with no answer. I left several voicemails, but I never got a reply. I sent texts hoping for just one message back. Nothing. A pit began to form in my stomach. I knew something was off. Chloe had been a constant in our lives for weeks, helping with everything from childcare to emotional support. And now she was gone without a word. It didn't sit right with me. I contacted the other mothers in the group, but none of them had heard anything either. No one knew where she had gone or why. The only thing anyone could tell me was that she had packed up her things late the night before and left without leaving any explanation. It felt like she had just disappeared into thin air. The silence that followed was unnerving. My mind raced with possibilities. Was it something I had said or done? Was she just burnt out from helping me? I didn't think so. Chloe had never shown signs of being overwhelmed. She'd always seemed so grounded, so in control. But now I wondered, was there something more to Chloe than I had known? I reached out to the one person I thought might know something, Valerie, the nurse who had introduced me to Chloe. I hoped she had some insight, some clue as to where Chloe had gone or why she left so abruptly. Valerie's response only deepened the mystery. "I'm sorry, Emma. I don't know anything." Chloe was always very professional. She never mentioned anything about leaving. But I'll see if I can find out more. Days passed and still there was no word from Chloe. It was as if she had simply vanished. I tried to keep it together for Ethan and Emily, but inside I was starting to unravel. I had lost James, and now it felt like I was losing Chloe too. She had become a part of my small, fragile support system, and without her I felt exposed. I began to worry about what might happen next. Would I be left to face everything on my own, just like I always had before? The days that followed were filled with uncertainty. I couldn't stop thinking about Chloe. I kept asking myself, where did she go? Why did she leave without any explanation? Was something wrong? Or was there something about Chloe that I hadn't known? As I searched for answers, a strange thought began to take hold of me. What if Chloe wasn't who she said she was? I didn't know anything about her past. I knew she had worked with traumatized children and had a calm, nurturing demeanor. But what did I really know about her life before she entered mine? What if she had been hiding something? What if she had a history that made her leave without warning? I couldn't help but feel a growing sense of unease. Chloe had always seemed so trustworthy, but now the idea of her disappearance felt like a thread unraveling in my mind. I had trusted her with my children, with my life, and now I didn't know if I could trust anyone again. I spent hours trying to piece together the fragments of information I had. I went through old text messages and looked back at all the times Chloe had been there for me. Had she ever shown any signs of instability? Had she ever given me any reason to doubt her? But nothing stood out. She had been nothing but kind, patient, and professional. So why had she left? And more importantly, where had she gone? I was left with more questions than answers, and the more I thought about it, the more the nagging feeling of doubt gnawed at me. I needed to know the truth. I needed to understand what had happened to Chloe, and why she had disappeared without a trace. As the days wore on, I became more and more obsessed with finding answers. I started asking around, talking to people who might have known Chloe, trying to gather any piece of information I could. But it was like chasing shadows. Every lead led to a dead end. The more I dug, the more I realized something. I might never find out the truth about Chloe. And that scared me, because if she had been hiding something, it meant I had been living a lie. If Chloe wasn't who she seemed to be, then who else in my life was pretending to be something they weren't? The mystery of Chloe's disappearance had opened a door I wasn't ready to walk through. But now I had no choice but to face whatever lay behind it. It's strange how things change in such a short period of time. Only a few weeks ago, I would have never imagined that I'd be standing here today, completely free from the chains I'd allowed to bind me for so long. The past year has been a whirlwind of heartache, loss, and self-discovery. But now, as I sit in the quiet of my apartment, with the twins playing quietly in the corner, I realize just how much I've grown. I've been forced to confront parts of myself I didn't even know existed, and in doing so, I've made decisions that I never thought I'd have the strength to make. It was Chloe's disappearance that pushed me to finally see the truth. In her absence, I had spent countless hours replaying everything she had done for me and the kids. And though I still didn't know why she had left, I realized that her presence had been a lifeline. But more importantly, it had been a reminder that I didn't have to do everything alone. She had stepped into my life when I needed help, and for that I would always be grateful. But it was time for me to stop relying on anyone else to take care of me and my children. And then there were my parents, the people who should have been my foundation, the people I had spent my entire life trying to please. I thought about the years I had spent supporting them financially, emotionally, the constant need to prove that I was worthy of their love, worthy of being seen as more than just that other daughter, the one who could never measure up to Emily. I had poured my time, my energy, my money into them, hoping, praying, that one day they would finally see me for who I really was, but I was wrong. They would never see me as anything more than an obligation, someone they could count on when it was convenient for them. It had taken the cruelty of their rejection during my surgery for me to finally see that truth. The moment I cut off financial support to them, I felt a rush of clarity. I had been living in their shadow for too long, trying to meet their expectations while neglecting my own needs, my own well-being. And now I had to cut the emotional ties as well. The decision wasn't easy, of course. My parents were my family, the only family I had left. But the truth was that they had never truly been there for me. They had always chosen their own comfort over the well-being of their daughter and grandchildren. They had never asked about my surgery or how the twins were coping. All they cared about was their own plans, their own comfort. I thought about the conversations we had, all the times they had made me feel small, insignificant, like I didn't matter. And I realized something: I was done. I was done trying to win their approval. I was done hoping for their love. It wasn't coming. In the weeks after the surgery, I started to rebuild my life. Slowly, I found my strength again. I began to realize that I was capable of doing this on my own, that I didn't need my parents' financial support or emotional validation to feel whole. I wasn't a burden. I was a mother, and that was enough. I reached out to a therapist, something I had never done before, and began to work through my grief, my anger, and my fears. I started to see a clearer picture of who I was, who I could be, if I stopped living for other people and started living for myself. The idea of living independently, without the weight of my parents' expectations hanging over me, felt freeing. It felt like I could finally breathe. I began to make plans. Small ones at first. I hired a new childcare provider, a wonderful woman named Sarah, who was kind and understanding and didn't make me feel like I was imposing on her. I found a way to reduce my financial commitments so I could finally start saving for the future, something I had put off for years. And most importantly, I started to take care of myself, something I had neglected for far too long. But even as I began to rebuild my life, there was still a part of me that worried. I worried about the twins, about what they would think when they grew older and realized how little their grandparents had been involved in their lives. I worried about what they would feel when they realized that I had made the decision to cut off the people who were supposed to love us unconditionally. But then I looked at them, Ethan with his wide, curious eyes and Emily with her quiet, thoughtful nature, and I knew that I was doing the right thing. I was teaching them that love should never be about obligation, that family should be about support, care, and respect. They deserved better than what my parents had given them. They deserved a mother who wasn't afraid to stand up for them, for herself. I decided to make a clean break, to stop waiting for my parents to come around. I blocked their numbers from my phone, and though it pained me, I didn't answer when they started calling again. I didn't need their guilt or their apologies. I had made my peace with my decision. And then, a few months later, I received a letter from my mother. I held it in my hands, staring at it for a long time before I opened it. My heart raced, unsure of what to expect. Was this another attempt to guilt me into helping them again? Or was it something different? I unfolded the letter slowly, reading her words carefully. She apologized for how she had treated me, for the years of neglect, for the way she had placed her own needs above mine. She admitted that she had been wrong, that she had failed me as a mother. It was a long letter, filled with regret and sorrow, but most importantly, it was an acknowledgement of my pain. As I finished reading, I felt a strange sense of closure. For the first time, my mother had acknowledged my feelings, my sacrifices, and my decision to walk away. It wasn't a perfect apology, but it was enough. Enough for me to know that I had made the right choice. I didn't respond immediately. I needed time to process. But I didn't feel the need to rush. For the first time in my life, I was living for me. And that was enough. I had finally done it. I had taken control of my life, I was starting over, and I was learning to live for myself and my children. I had built a solid foundation of independence, despite the lingering shadows of my family's betrayal. But I hadn't realized that one more painful revelation was waiting just around the corner. One that would force me to question everything I thought I knew about my own sister. It started on a quiet afternoon. Ethan and Emily were napping, and I had a rare moment of peace. I had just finished up some work for my graphic design clients, and was about to relax with a book when I noticed something strange. My phone buzzing on the kitchen counter. It was Emily's name on the screen, and I felt a mixture of hesitation and curiosity as I answered. "Hey, Eminencia. What's up?" Her voice sounded lighter than usual, almost too casual. "Just checking in, sis. How are you and the twins doing?" It wasn't that Emily had been distant, but the conversation felt off, like we were both walking on eggshells. Since I had decided to cut ties with our parents, Emily and I had started talking more. I wanted to believe that she was genuinely interested in mending our relationship, that she wasn't just the product of the same toxic upbringing I had suffered. I had hoped that maybe, just maybe, she was starting to see things differently. But as the conversation dragged on, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. There was a subtle shift in her tone, a strange undercurrent that I couldn't quite put my finger on. Before I could dig deeper, she had quickly ended the call, telling me she had some errands to run. It was the next day that the truth began to unravel. I had been using Emily's old tablet to entertain the twins while I cooked, and as I swiped through the apps, I accidentally opened a message thread between Emily and our parents. First, I didn't think much of it. I had no reason to believe anything was amiss. But as I began to read through the conversation, my heart sank. The messages were clear. Emily was asking our parents for help with her finances, and in return, she promised to do whatever it takes to fix the rift between us. She was telling them that she was just playing the role of a caring sister to win me over, to get back in my good graces and continue receiving the financial support I had been giving her for years. It was all laid out in black and white. "Don't worry, Mom and Dad," she wrote. "I'll make things right with Emma. I know she'll come around if I show her that I care. She's too soft to resist. Once I've earned her trust again, I'll make sure she starts sending money like before. We can keep things the way they were." Reading those words, I felt like the floor had just been ripped out from under me. I had thought Emily was changing, that she was starting to understand my pain, but the truth hit me harder than any betrayal from our parents ever could. All this time, she hadn't truly acknowledged the damage our parents had done. She hadn't realized how deep the scars ran, how much they had hurt me. She hadn't changed at all. Emily had simply been playing a game, pretending to care in order to keep the financial support flowing. I was stunned. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. My own sister, the one I had always tried to protect, the one I had hoped would finally see the truth, had never truly learned anything. She was still just as selfish, still just as eager to exploit me for her own gain. I shut the tablet off and sat there, the weight of the discovery pressing down on me. I felt a sickening twist in my stomach, as if my entire world had just been shattered. I had been living in a lie, thinking that Emily had grown up, that she understood the gravity of what had happened. But it turned out that I had been the one fooling myself. I couldn't just ignore what I had seen. I had to confront Emily. I had to ask her the hard questions. Later that evening, as the twins played in their room, I texted Emily, asking if we could talk. I didn't know how to approach her with what I had discovered, but I knew I had to. There was no way I could let this go. Not after everything I had been through. She responded almost immediately, agreeing to meet me at my apartment. I was nervous, my hands shaking as I prepared for the conversation I never thought I'd have to have. But I had no choice. I had to know the truth. When she arrived, I invited her into the living room, trying to keep my composure, but I could feel the anger building inside me. I couldn't look at her the same way anymore. How could I? How could I trust her after everything that had happened? "Emily," I began, my voice steady but filled with a quiet fury. "We need to talk." Her eyes flickered with concern, but I could tell she was hiding something. I didn't waste any time. "I saw the messages between you and Mom and Dad," I said, my voice cutting through the tension like a knife. "I know what you've been doing. I know you've been pretending to care, pretending to be the sister I've always wanted, just to get me to send money again." Her face turned pale, and she quickly shifted in her seat, trying to avoid my gaze. But I wasn't going to let her hide anymore. "I never thought you would do this to me, Emily," I continued, the pain evident in my voice. "After everything I've been through, after everything I've given, you were just playing a game, weren't you?" She didn't respond right away. I could see the conflict in her eyes, but I wasn't about to let her off the hook so easily. The silence stretched on, thick and heavy, until she finally spoke. "Emma, I didn't mean for it to go this far," she said, her voice trembling. "I didn't realize how much it hurt you. I just wanted things to go back to normal." The words didn't soothe me. They didn't fix anything. It wasn't enough. Not after everything I had been through. I looked at her, my heart breaking for the sister I thought I knew, but also angry at the betrayal I had uncovered. I didn't know where to go from here. What was I supposed to do with this information? Could I ever rebuild a relationship with her after this? As I stared at Emily, the answer came to me. I couldn't keep living for other people's approval. I had already taken the first step by cutting ties with our parents. Now I had to decide whether or not Emily was someone I could keep in my life, or if she too was just another person who would hurt me in the end. The choice, as always, was mine. The first few weeks after surgery felt like an endless battle. Every movement, every breath was a reminder of how fragile I truly was. The incision site burned with every shift in position, and the exhaustion weighed on me like a heavy blanket I couldn't shake off. But despite the pain, there was something else. Something subtle. Something I hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. I slowly started to regain my strength. Each small victory, like managing to get out of bed without feeling dizzy, was a step toward getting my life back. Chloe continued to be a steady presence in my recovery. She was more than just a caregiver for the twins. She became my emotional anchor. She'd sit with me for hours talking about anything and everything, making me laugh even when I didn't feel like it. I didn't realize how much I needed someone like her until she was right there, helping me navigate through the aftermath of the surgery and everything that came with it. Chloe wasn't just a nanny. She was a friend. She listened when I needed to vent, offered practical advice when I was overwhelmed, and most importantly, she helped me find joy in the little things again. It was in those quiet moments with the twins nestled in her arms that I began to remember what it felt like to be taken care of. But even as I recovered, there were moments when I felt myself slipping back into the shadows of the past. The messages from my parents were the worst of those moments. They started coming a few days after I had blocked their numbers. At first, it was just a few texts here and there, polite, almost as if nothing had happened. But soon the messages became more insistent, desperate even. My mother, always the one to reach out when she wanted something, bombarded me with pleas. Emma, please, we really need your help. Things are getting tight here. We can't manage without you. Please. We've always supported you. Don't forget that. Another message came the next day. I don't know why you're doing this to us. You've never been this cold. You're just abandoning us. We need you. Each message made my stomach turn. I read them over and over, each time feeling the weight of my decision creeping back into my chest. They hadn't asked how I was doing. They hadn't even mentioned the twins. All they wanted was money. The same old pattern, the same manipulation, and it sickened me. As I sat there scrolling through the endless stream of texts, I knew what I had to do. It was time to share the truth with Emily. I couldn't keep carrying this burden alone. Couldn't keep pretending that everything was fine between us. The lies, the secrets, the manipulations, they were all too much. I had to tell her what I had seen, what I had learned. I had to show her the reality of the situation, to make her understand that our parents had been using us both, and that I couldn't keep being their emotional punching bag. The next day I called Emily. I wasn't sure how she'd react, but I knew that I couldn't hide the truth anymore. Emily, I said, my voice steady but full of the weight I was carrying. We need to talk. About Mom and Dad. There was a pause before she spoke. What about them? She asked, her tone hesitant. I've seen their messages, I told her. I know what's been going on. They're still trying to manipulate me into sending them money. They don't care about me. They never have. They only care about what I can give them. I could hear the silence on the other end of the line. Emily wasn't speaking, but I could almost feel her processing what I was saying. Wait, what do you mean? She finally asked. You've seen the messages? Yes. I read them. They're asking for money again, and they don't even care how I'm doing. They haven't asked about me or the twins once. It's the same old thing, Emily. They're using us. For a moment, I wasn't sure if Emily was going to believe me, but then slowly she responded. Emma, I didn't know, she said quietly. I didn't realize how much they were still doing this to you. I thought they'd changed. I really did. I could hear the shock in her voice and something shifted. The coldness that had lingered between us started to dissipate, replaced by something softer. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe it was realization. Either way, it felt like a small breakthrough. I don't know what to do anymore, I admitted. I've cut ties with them, but it's hard. I'm still their daughter, and they're still my parents. But they haven't changed. They're never going to change. I'm sorry, Emma, Emily said, her voice thick with emotion. I didn't see it before. But now I get it. I see it. I see what you've been going through. And for the first time in a long time, I felt a sense of relief. Maybe Emily wasn't the person I had once hoped for. But in that moment, I saw that she was capable of understanding, capable of standing by me. You're not alone anymore, Emily continued. I'm with you. I'll help with the twins. I'll help however I can. Tears welled up in my eyes, and I felt the weight I had been carrying for so long begin to lift. Maybe my parents were lost to me. Maybe they would always be selfish, manipulative people who never really understood me. But Emily, my sister, was starting to see the truth. She was starting to see me, really see me. "I'm glad you're on my side," I said softly. "Thank you, Emily, for understanding." As the conversation ended, I felt a strange peace settle over me. There was still so much uncertainty in my life. I still had a long road ahead of me in my recovery. But I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to face it alone. I had Emily now, and while our relationship would never be perfect, we were taking the first steps toward rebuilding what had been broken. And for the first time in a long time, I felt a flicker of hope. The days following my conversation with Emily were filled with a mix of emotions. Relief was the first to settle in. For the first time in years, I felt like I wasn't carrying the weight of my parents' expectations or their manipulations on my shoulders. Emily had finally come to understand the truth. She was beginning to see my pain, the years of sacrifice, and the toll it had taken on me. I no longer felt like I was fighting this battle alone, but there was also a lingering sadness. Sadness for what I had lost, for the family I had always dreamed of but could never have. As Emily and I worked together, slowly mending the cracks in our relationship, she began to feel an overwhelming sense of guilt. She couldn't shake the feeling that she had been blind to what was happening all these years. She had believed the lies our parents told her, convincing herself that their actions were justified. But now, with the weight of the truth crashing down on her, Emily was struggling to reconcile her past loyalty to our parents with the reality of their selfishness. One evening, as we sat together in my living room, she turned to me with a look of deep remorse. "Emma," she said, her voice quiet and filled with regret. "I can't believe I ever let them manipulate me like that. I thought they were right. I thought they were the ones who knew what was best, but I was wrong." I reached out and placed a hand on her arm, offering a comforting squeeze. "It's not your fault, Emily," I told her, my voice gentle but firm. "You didn't know. But now you do. And that's all that matters." Emily nodded, wiping away a stray tear. "I just wish I had seen it sooner. I wish I had known how much they hurt you." "I never meant to hurt you, Emma." I smiled softly, understanding her pain. "We can't change the past, but we can move forward together. And that's what I need from you now. I need you to stand by me, to help me rebuild what's left of our family." With that, Emily took a deep breath, and I could see a sense of resolve forming in her. "I'm with you," she said, her voice steady now. "I'll help you with everything. We'll fix this. I'll explain everything to Mom and Dad. I'll make sure they understand what they've done to you. And I'll make sure they can't hurt you anymore." Her words were a lifeline. I felt the bond between us growing stronger, more genuine. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about us. And together we could face whatever came next. But I wasn't prepared for what came next. A few days after our conversation, the phone rang. It was my mother. My heart sank as I picked up the receiver. I had blocked their numbers weeks ago, but they still found ways to reach out, to worm their way back into my life. "Emma," my mother's voice was shaky, but there was no real empathy in her tone. "We need to talk." I didn't answer right away. I didn't know how to respond. I had cut them off. I had made the decision to walk away from their toxic grasp, and now here they were again trying to pull me back in. "What do you want?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady, but I could feel the anger bubbling up inside me. We're in trouble," she said, her voice almost pleading now. "Our finances are in a mess. We've had to sell the boat, the timeshare, and now we might lose the house. You promised to help us, Emma. We need you. We can't make it without you." I felt my chest tighten. The familiar feeling of obligation started to creep in, but I quickly pushed it away. "I'm done, Mom," I said, my voice firm. "I'm not helping you anymore. You had your chance. You chose your own selfish desires over your own children. You chose to abandon me when I needed you most. I won't let you manipulate me anymore." There was a long pause followed by a heavy sigh. "You don't understand." My mother's voice broke, and I could almost hear her frustration. "We've worked so hard, and now everything is falling apart. This is your fault, Emma. If you hadn't cut us off, we wouldn't be in this situation." I blinked in disbelief. The audacity. The complete lack of accountability. They were blaming me for their mess, for their own poor decisions. They hadn't learned a thing. Not a single thing. No, Mom, I said, my voice trembling with a mixture of fury and sadness. This is your fault. You never cared about me. You never cared about Ethan and Emily. You only cared about yourselves. My mother didn't respond. I could feel her silence on the other end of the line, like a wall of stubborn pride. It wasn't about the money anymore. It was about power, control, and the refusal to accept responsibility for their actions. I'm done, I repeated. You will not manipulate me anymore. You've done enough damage. I'm moving on. And with that I hung up the phone. I stood there for a moment, the weight of the conversation pressing on my shoulders, but there was no relief. There was no satisfaction in the finality of it all. I had said what needed to be said, but it didn't feel like enough. It was never enough with them. I didn't have time to dwell on the pain though, because at that moment Emily entered the room. She had been listening, and I could see the concern on her face. Are you okay? She asked, her voice soft but filled with worry. I nodded, but my throat felt tight. I'm fine. It's just hard, you know? I don't think they'll ever change. And I don't think they ever really loved me. Emily walked over to me, placing her hand gently on my arm. You've done the right thing, Emma, she said. They may never understand, but you've done what's best for you and the kids. And that's what matters. I looked at her, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I wasn't alone in this battle. She was with me, fully on my side. Together we could rebuild our lives. We're going to be okay, I whispered, more to myself than to her. We're going to be okay. It was a cold, crisp morning when I first saw them again. I was in the kitchen making breakfast for the twins when I glanced out the window and froze. There they were, standing on my doorstep, my parents, Robert and Linda Harris, the people who had spent most of my life making me feel like an afterthought, who had never once acknowledged the depths of my sacrifices, now standing there, looking hesitant but desperate. My heart skipped a beat, and a wave of anxiety washed over me. I hadn't seen or spoken to them since our last conversation, the one where I had made it clear that I was cutting ties with them, financially and emotionally. I'd blocked their numbers. I had erased them from my life, or so I thought. But here they were, knocking at my door with no shame, no understanding of how much pain they had caused me. I wasn't sure how I felt in that moment. Anger, disbelief, frustration. All of those emotions collided inside me. But one thing I knew for sure was that I wasn't going to let them walk back into my life so easily. I had fought so hard to get to this point, to stand strong and independent, and I wasn't about to let them undo everything with a few manipulative words. Taking a deep breath, I walked to the door. I hesitated for just a moment before opening it, and there they stood, my mother clutching a folder in her hands, and my father standing behind her, looking tired, his eyes filled with a mixture of guilt and entitlement. Emma, my mother began, her voice soft but filled with that familiar, sickly sweetness. We need to talk. Can we come in? I didn't say a word. I just stood there watching them. What did they want this time? What were they going to say to try to guilt me into helping them again? I couldn't believe they had the audacity to show up here in my space, after everything that had happened. Please, my father added, his tone more urgent now. We're in real trouble. You have to understand. We can't make it without your help. I crossed my arms, my body tensing with every word they spoke. I couldn't believe this. After everything they had put me through, after rejecting me when I needed them most, they were here again asking for more. They had no shame. No, I said firmly, my voice steady. But it wasn't without the edge of anger that had been building in me since I saw them standing there. I've already told you. I'm not going to help you anymore. You've made your choices, and now you have to live with them. My mother stepped forward, her eyes pleading. Emma, you don't understand. We've lost everything. The house is going to be foreclosed. We've already sold the boat, the timeshare, everything. We can't survive without your help. We've been living beyond our means, and now we're paying for it. Please, we need you. I looked at her, my mind racing. How could they be so oblivious? How could they be so blinded by their own entitlement? All these years I had been the one to support them, to pick up the pieces, to make sure they didn't fall apart. And now, when the reality of their choices finally hit them, they thought they could just come to me for a bailout. When will you realize that I've always been the one helping you? I asked, my voice rising. When will you understand that I've been carrying you for years, And now you think it's okay to just come back and ask for more. When I needed you the most, when I was in the hospital and facing surgery, you were too busy with your concert tickets to care. You never cared about me or the kids. You cared about yourselves. My father shifted uncomfortably, but he didn't back down. Emma, we've made mistakes. We know that. But we're your parents. We deserve your help. We're not asking for much. Just a little, just to get by. I shook my head, my frustration building with every word they spoke. I wasn't going to be manipulated again.
No.
You don't deserve my help. Not anymore. You had your chance. And you squandered it. I stepped back slightly, keeping the door partially open but making it clear that I wasn't inviting them in. You've made your bed, and now you have to lie in it. I'm done. I'm not helping you. My mother's eyes filled with tears, but there was no sincerity in them. Please, Emma. We've always been there for you, haven't we? We're family. I scoffed. You've never been there for me. Not really. You've used me. I've always been the one to fix things, to pick up the pieces, and now you think you can just come back and pretend nothing happened?
No, Mom.
It doesn't work like that. There was a long, heavy silence between us. I could see my parents faltering, their facade of entitlement crumbling just slightly under the weight of my words. They were used to getting what they wanted from me, used to my weakness, my guilt. But I wasn't that person anymore. I couldn't afford to be. Not for them. Not for anyone. My mother looked at me one last time, her voice barely above a whisper. You're punishing us, Emma. You're punishing us for the mistakes we've made. You're breaking this family apart. I took a deep breath, my chest tightening. I'm not punishing you, Mom. I'm just choosing to stop letting you control my life. This is what it takes to stop being your pawn. I'm not breaking this family. You and Dad did that when you chose your own selfish desires over your own children. With those words, I gently closed the door between us, shutting out the years of manipulation, guilt, and disappointment. For the first time, I felt a sense of peace. It wasn't relief exactly, but it was the quiet comfort that comes with knowing I had made the right decision. Inside, I stood there, taking a moment to let the reality settle in. I had stood my ground, something I hadn't been able to do for so long. And though I knew they would keep trying to guilt me, keep making excuses, I was no longer the person who would fall for it. I had finally found my strength, and this time there would be no going back. 1 year had passed since that cold, decisive moment when I had shut the door on my parents. A year since I had made the most difficult and necessary choice of my life, to stop letting them manipulate me, to stop supporting their toxic behavior, and to finally put myself and my children first. The road to where I was now had been far from easy, but I had made it. I had fought through the pain, the guilt, and the fear of what it meant to sever those family ties. But in doing so, I had found a sense of peace and strength that I had never known before. My life was mine again. I had moved into a new home with the twins, a small cozy house in a neighborhood that felt right, safe and quiet, with neighbors who actually cared. It was a place where I could breathe without the weight of guilt on my shoulders, where I could build something new without constantly looking over my shoulder, wondering if my parents would show up, demanding more from me. The house wasn't anything extravagant, but it was mine. It was a symbol of everything I had fought for: independence, peace, and the ability to start over. The twins were thriving. Ethan, with his endless energy and curious nature, was growing up to be the little explorer I had always hoped he would be. And Emily, with her quiet intelligence, was learning to navigate the world with a calm confidence that made me proud every single day. I had become not just their mother, but also their protector, their guide, their constant. And they had become my reason to keep going, my driving force to never look back. Financially, I was stable. I had taken up a few freelance graphic design jobs, and slowly my business was picking up. It wasn't easy, it took time to rebuild, to gain confidence again. But with every project, I could feel myself growing stronger. I no longer lived in the shadow of my parents' expectations. I had learned to trust my own instincts, to make decisions that were in the best interest of myself and my children. But even in the midst of this newfound independence, there was a lingering question in my mind. A question I hadn't fully confronted until recently. What about my parents? Had they truly changed? Or was it just another ploy, another attempt to manipulate me? Would I ever hear from them again? It was a letter that arrived one afternoon, a simple envelope with my name on it, that made me pause. I sat down on the couch, the twins playing in the other room, and opened the envelope. Inside was a letter from my mother. "Dear Emma," it began. "I know I have failed you. I know I have hurt you in ways I will never fully understand. But I am sorry. We are sorry. For everything. We never meant to drive you away. We were selfish, and I see now that we made many mistakes. Your father and I have spent the last year reflecting on our actions, and we know that we need to change. We want to make things right if you'll let us. We are truly sorry." There were more words, but they blurred together as I read through the apology. It was genuine, I could tell that much. They had admitted their mistakes, acknowledged their wrongs, and expressed remorse in a way I hadn't expected. But there was something about it, something in the way the letter was written, that didn't sit entirely right with me. It was full of apologies, but I didn't know if I could trust them. Could I forgive them? Could I let them back into my life after everything they had put me through? I folded the letter and set it down on the coffee table. I didn't know what to feel. Part of me wanted to believe them, wanted to open the door and let them back in. But another part of me, the part that had fought so hard to get where I was, wasn't ready to forget everything they had done. I had learned the hard way that actions spoke louder than words. And words, however apologetic, didn't erase the years of manipulation and neglect. I knew that I couldn't rush into anything. I had to take my time. I had spent so long living in the shadow of their approval, letting them control my choices and my life. But now I had learned to stand on my own. I had learned that my worth wasn't tied to their approval, and my strength wasn't dependent on their love. The decision wasn't just about forgiving them or cutting them off forever. It was about understanding that I had the power to choose, to set boundaries, and to protect my peace. And I wasn't going to let anyone, not even my parents, take that from me again. As I looked at the letter again, I realized that I didn't need to make a decision right away. I could take my time, process what I was feeling, and decide what was best for me and for my children. There was no rush. And this time I was going to make the decision on my own terms. I put the letter in a drawer, and I let out a long, steady breath. The weight of the past year lifted from my shoulders just a little bit more. I wasn't the same person I had been a year ago. I was stronger now, more confident in my ability to face whatever came my way. And no matter what happened with my parents, I knew that I would be okay. My children would be okay. We had each other. That night, as I lay in bed with the twins asleep in their room, I reflected on everything that had brought me here. The journey had been long, and at times it had been painful, but I had made it. I had fought for my independence, for my peace, and for my children's future. And that was worth more than any apology, more than any promise of change. Tomorrow was a new day, and I was ready for whatever it brought. I had learned that life wasn't about waiting for others to change. It was about changing myself, growing stronger, and protecting those I loved. And in that, I found the peace I had been searching for all along.
Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Hit the bell icon for updates on new videos. See you next time.